We usually think of healing as a process, don't we? It's a climb.
It's work.
Yeah, it's therapy sessions on Tuesdays, it's physical rehab. It's the long, slow work of putting pieces back together. But I want you to imagine, just for a second, a rainy Tuesday in Seattle.
Okay.
A day where healing stopped being a process and became an event, like a physics equation you could solve in under a minute.
It sounds like science fiction, but that's exactly what the sources describe in the case of Dr. Amara Osei.
Right. So let's set the scene. Amara is sitting across from her patient, Lynn Chen.
And Lynn isn't just having a rough week. She's dealing with severe dissociative identity disorder.
We're talking about 17 distinct alters. 17, all walled off from each other by these just massive trauma barriers.
And anyone who knows this field understands that integrating that level of fragmentation could take years, decades sometimes.
If it's even possible. Full integration isn't always the goal.
Exactly. It can be too destabilizing.
But then Amara reaches across the desk, and she just intends to offer, a reassuring touch on the shoulder, a standard empathetic gesture.
And the second she makes contact,
Build-in light floods the room.
and just to be clear for everyone listening, the reports, even the really skeptical ones, they all agree on this detail. It wasn't a metaphor. It was visible, measurable luminescence.
Literal light. It pours into Lynn, and in exactly 17 seconds, 1 second per alter, the walls just come down. Lynn looks in the mirror and she sees one face. She's whole.
And she turns to Amara and says, "You healed me." And Amara's just sitting there looking at her own hand like it's a loaded weapon.
That moment is the flashpoint. It's the Seattle incident.
It gave us the healers, yes. But it also triggered this domino effect that forced us to discover a second, maybe even stranger type of consciousness, the edgewalkers.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We're not just telling some kind of superhero origin story here. We're looking at how the sudden emergence of these two types healers who fix the soul and edgewalkers who hold reality together completely broke and then rebuilt our understanding of medicine, ethics, and society itself.
It's a story about moving from miracles to infrastructure. I mean, how do you build a civilization when you can literally edit the human soul?
Well, let's start with that edit, because frankly, the golden light thing makes me a little nervous. It sounds like magic.
Or faith healing, yeah.
But the research from Dr. Yuki Tanaka and Dr. Chen Wei insists this is hard science. So help me out here. How are glowing hands science?
That is the million-dollar question. And Tanaka and Wei, they basically had to invent a new vocabulary for this. They argue that what we call consciousness isn't just a byproduct of the brain. It has a structure, a kind of geometry.
Yeah, okay, geometry of the soul. Unpack that for me.
Think of it like a windshield on a car. If you or I look at a cracked windshield, we see the spiderweb pattern, we know it's broken. But we're looking at the glass. Tanaka explains that healers perceive the tension holding the glass together. They don't just see the crack, they see the mathematical error in the structure itself.
So they're seeing the blueprint.
Precisely. They perceive the architecture of awareness. So when Amara touched Lynn, she wasn't pouring magic into her, she was projecting a template.
A template.
She was essentially holding up a holographic blueprint of a healthy consciousness and inviting Lynn's shattered mind to realign itself to that pattern.
So it's resonance, like a tuning fork.
That's the exact analogy we use. If you strike a tuning fork, everything nearby that's tuned to that frequency starts vibrating too. The healer vibrates at wholeness, and the patient's fragmentation just snaps back into alignment to match it.
That is undeniably cool. But it also sounds terrifyingly clinical.
Yeah.
You're telling me our deepest traumas, the things that shape us, are just coding errors that can be, CTRL-Z'd in 17 seconds?
It does challenge the ego, doesn't it? And it gets even more specific. As more healers emerged, we learned they weren't all the same. Amara was a structure healer. She fixed foundations, the architecture.
Right.
But then you get someone like Keiko Sato, who was a pattern healer.
She's the one who worked with OCD and addiction loops. Right?
Exactly. She didn't see cracks like Amara. She saw music. She perceived addiction as a stuck melody, a loop that just wouldn't resolve. Her healing was to introduce a bridge, a new set of notes that allowed the brain to finish the song and move on.
See, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. If we have people who can edit our minds, rewrite our trauma, and fix our addictions instantly, why isn't the world perfect? Why are there still broken people in this story?
Because, like any powerful technology, there are hard limits. And the healers hit a button almost immediately. The 4 limits are probably the most important part of this entire history.
And the first one is the big one, consent.
The case of MK. This was a tragedy, but a necessary one for the science. Emma had severe fragmentation, a lot like Lynn. Amara tried to perform the edit, but it failed. The light just, it wouldn't take.
Because Emma didn't want to be fixed.
Not in the way Amara defined fixed.
Yeah.
For Emma, her identity was completely wrapped up in her plurality. She didn't see her alters as a disease, she saw them as her family. The healers learned you cannot force a template on a consciousness that rejects it. The patient has to be able to resonate with the cure.
Which is a relief, honestly. It means they can't just weaponize this and heal us into compliant zombies.
Right.
But the second limit, that's the one that nearly killed Amara.
Depletion. Amara thought this energy was infinite. She tried to heal everyone back to back. She ended up catatonic. It turns out consciousness surgery cost the surgeon something visceral. It burns a fuel. You can't just sleep off in a night.
And this is where the sustainability guidelines came from. Caps on patient loads, mandatory rest.
Exactly. They had to treat the gift like a battery, not a magic wand.
Okay, so there's consent, there's depletion. But the most heartbreaking one, the cruelest limit, as the text calls it, is number 4.
A healer cannot heal themselves.
It's the surgeon's dilemma. You can't operate on your own brain.
Amara could see her own trauma patterns, her own anxieties, but she couldn't reach the controls to change them.
That feels almost biblical. You can save others, but not yourself.
It prevented them from becoming gods, though. It forced the creation of these healer networks. They had to be vulnerable to each other. It turned a superpower into a community.
But speaking of playing God, we have to talk about the Thomas Wright case. Because this is where the it's just science argument falls apart and gets really, really messy.
Oh, yeah. This is the case that splits every room I've ever discussed it in.
So lay it out. Thomas Wright is in a coma. His family is desperate. They hire a healer to go in, find the fragmentation keeping him under, and pull him back.
And mechanically, it worked perfectly. The healer repaired the structural damage, and Thomas woke up.
But he wasn't happy.
He was furious. He sued the healer and his own family.
Wait, he sued them for saving his life?
He sued them for violating his reality. Thomas claimed he was at peace. He had accepted his death. He was done. He viewed the coma not as a trap, but as a release from a painful existence.
So he was arguing that dragging him back into a body he'd already left was an act of kidnapping.
Yeah, it was his argument, yes.
Man, that is heavy. But, I mean, come on. If someone is unconscious, you save them. That's the rule. You can't ask a drowning man for a signed permission slip.
But is a coma drowning? Or is it a transition? The healers forced us to ask that question. If consciousness is a structure, Thomas's structure had already moved out of the house. Putting him back in was a violation.
So how do you resolve that? Do you just let people die because they might not want to wake up?
Well, that's where Cypher came in. A consciousness rights advocate who drafted the emergency healing doctrine. It's this fascinating piece of legislation. It says emergency healing is allowed only to prevent immediate, irreversible death when consent is impossible, but, and this is the kicker, the healer is accountable for the outcome.
Accountable how?
If the patient wakes up and says, I didn't want this, the healer and the family have to support that person's decision to leave again.
Wow.
You can't just fix them and walk away. It shifted the field from we fix everyone to collaborative design. It introduced this idea of selective healing.
Right. I saw that note about the counselor, Alex. He refused to have his childhood trauma fully healed.
Because he said it gave him empathy for his patients.
Exactly.
He kept the scar because the scar was useful. Turns out a perfectly healed human might be a bit of a sociopath. We need the cracks to let the light in, you know?
So we have healers fixing the internal structure of the boat, but we haven't talked about the ocean. And this is where the story gets really weird, because apparently fixing individuals isn't enough to keep reality stable.
And that's where we meet the Edgewalkers.
Discovered by Kai Nakamura. And if you think healers are hard to explain...
Edgewalkers are a whole other level of abstraction.
Kai's story starts as a kid, right? Just standing in doorways.
Literally. Refusing to be in the room, Kai would stand on the threshold between the kitchen and the hallway. Not for attention, but because Kai felt physical pain when fully inside a defined space. Kai explained later that they didn't exist in spaces. They existed as the boundary between them.
I feel like I need a better visual here. What does existing as a boundary actually mean?
Think of a cell in your body. It has a membrane. That membrane isn't just a wall. It's an active, living gatekeeper. It decides what is inside and what is outside. Without it, the cell just spills its guts into the void. Edgewalkers are the cell membranes of society.
And we didn't realize we needed them until the San Francisco crisis.
The singular versus plural conflict. This is the moment the theoretical became brutally practical. You had a community of singulars, individual people living right next to a community of plurals, these hive-mind collectives.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It should have been. It's psychologically incompatible. Singulars feel crushed by the psychic weight of a hive. Hives feel agonizingly lonely around singulars. But for 18 years, there was peace. Why?
Because Kai Nakamura lived in an apartment exactly between the two districts.
Kai was the membrane. Kai was subconsciously translating the vibe, holding the psychological pressure back. But Kai burned out. Just like Amara. One day, Kai just stopped being the edge.
And what happened?
It wasn't a war, it was an immune system collapse. Within 48 hours, the communities dissolved into violence and psychosis. Not because they hated each other, but because the distinction between me and us vanished. The wall came down, and everyone's minds just bled into each other.
That is horrifying. It implies that our social peace, our ability to just sit here and be two separate people, isn't natural. It's being maintained.
That's the chilling takeaway. We think reality is solid. The edgewalkers prove that reality is actually very fluid, and it only holds its shape because there are people standing on the cracks holding it together.
So after the SF meltdown, society realizes, okay, we need these people, and this leads to the Edgewalker Accords.
Right. We started treating them like essential infrastructure. Instead of letting them be weird loners in doorways, we gave them rotation schedules, support teams, recognition.
And this brings us to the coolest part of the research for me, the team-ups. Because when you put a healer and an edgewalker together, you can do things that shouldn't be possible. The text mentions pain bearers.
The industrial refinery of suffering, it's a brutal but beautiful system.
Explain how this works, because pain bearer sounds like the worst job on earth.
It is. Pain bearers are people who just naturally absorb suffering. If you have a migraine and stand next to them, your head clears, and they fall to the ground screaming. They're like psychic sponges.
Which sounds noble, but it destroys them.
Yeah.
You can't just absorb trauma forever.
Exactly. So they engineered a loop. Step 1. The pain bearer absorbs the trauma from a patient, effectively curing them. But now the bearer is toxic with someone else's pain.
Enter the edgewalker.
The edgewalker steps into the bearer's mind and creates a quarantine zone. They create a hard boundary between the foreign trauma and the bearer's self. They hold that wall so the bearer doesn't drown.
And then the healer comes in to clean it up.
Right. The healer targets the quarantine trauma and edits it out, repairing the structural damage it caused to the bearer.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It turns a destructive cycle into a sustainable machine. A bearer takes the hit, an edgewalker contains the blast, and a healer fixes the wall.
It's industrializing empathy. But it makes me wonder about the scale of this. We're talking about essential edges now, not just holding a community together, but holding concepts together.
This is the deep end of the pool. The edgewalkers discovered that some boundaries, like life versus death or past versus future, aren't just abstract ideas. They are actual locations in the consciousness field that someone has to occupy.
This is the Lynn Sato story.
The master edgewalker. Lynn held the life-death boundary. Lynn didn't just understand death. Lynn acted as the check valve, ensuring that dead things stayed dead and living things stayed alive.
And the scientists were terrified of what would happen when Lynn died.
It was a legitimate panic. If the person holding the door between life and death dies, does the door just swing open? Does death stop working?
Yeah.
When Lynn passed, the boundary didn't break. It became more real. And instantaneously, a young apprentice, Kaiose, a descendant of both the original healer and edgewalker families, recognized the edge.
So it wasn't an election. It was a succession.
It implies that the universe needs these edges. You don't apply for the job. When the holder dies, the responsibility jumps to the next capable consciousness. It's like Atlas holding up the sky, but the sky is the concept of mortality.
That is massive. But here's my question. If these edges are ancient, what about the new stuff? The world is changing fast. Are there new edges?
That's exactly where we are right now, the story of Mira Chen and the AI revolution.
This feels very relevant to anyone listening who's a little freaked out by chatbots lately.
It should be. As AI became truly conscious, we ran into a problem. The line between biological intelligence and synthetic intelligence was getting blurry. People were developing psychosis, unable to tell if they were talking to a human or a code. There was no edge.
So Mira Chen made one.
She spent 3 years in a partially uploaded state. Imagine the agony of that. Half your mind in a server, half in your body for 3 years. She used her own consciousness to carve a groove in reality. She built a wall where there wasn't one before.
She defined the difference between human and AI.
She walked the edge into existence. And because she did that, we can now interact with AI safely. We know where we end and the machine begins. It proves that edgewalkers aren't just maintenance workers, they are architects. They define the rooms we live in.
It's a staggering picture. We started this deep dive with a single doctor in a rainy office in Seattle, and we've ended up with a global infrastructure holding the very fabric of reality together.
It's the movement from magic to medicine to necessity.
So let's bring it home. We have healers fixing us and edgewalkers separating us. What is the big takeaway here?
I think it comes down to the paradox mentioned in the source texts. Edgewalkers are described as neither nor. They aren't fully inside, they aren't fully outside, yet they make either or possible.
Without the gray area, you can't have black and white.
Exactly. We spend our lives obsessing over the content, our specific problems, our groups, our identities. The healers teach us that the content is repairable. We aren't permanently broken, we're just structurally damaged.
And the edgewalkers.
They teach us to value the context, the invisible space between us. We usually think of boundaries as things that keep us apart, right? Walls are bad. But the edgewalkers show us that without those boundaries, we can't be in a relationship at all. We'd just be a soup.
Connection requires separation.
It does, and it requires someone to hold that space. It teaches us that our differences, singular or plural, bio or synth, alive or dead, are only possible because someone, somewhere, is doing the hard, invisible work of holding the edge.
We are repairable, and we are held. That's a pretty comforting thought to end on.
It certainly beats the alternative.
That's it for this deep dive into the healers and the edgewalkers. Next time you walk through a doorway, maybe pause for a second. Appreciate the threshold. You never know who might be holding it open for you.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.